There is a word that isn't used in your Bible per se, but it is found really all throughout Scripture, the idea of it. And it's a word that philosophers will use. It's a word that preachers will use. It's a word you hear in everyday conversation. And for the most part, it's not usually used in a positive light, but a negative light. And in fact, that is the way we are going to look at it again this morning. It's the word culture. Culture. Our culture affects us. And the fact is that in many ways, our culture today can affect us in negative ways. Maybe one way to look at that is I just want us to begin with a little bit of a word survey or a thought survey. When you think about the words that you think and you say, or the thoughts that you think, do they mostly sound like this? I want, or I wish I had, or I need? Or do they mostly sound like this? I'm blessed. I have all that I need. The fact is that our culture today in America is what we could term a consumer culture. It really runs and is built into all aspects of our lives. When you just think about what success looks like in America today, essentially we say the American dream is having a house that is comfortable for you and that you can entertain guests with. And we definitely need a few cars to do all the things we need to do and get there the way we need to. And hopefully you are able to go on an annual vacation. And if you can do all of these things, then you essentially are living what we would call the American dream. And the counter to that is if you don't have all these things, you better get them because you won't be happy if you don't. And it's even built into our holidays, is it not? How do we celebrate holidays in America? We want to get the coolest stuff. And then that's how we celebrate. I mean, just ask your kids what the best holiday is. They'll tell you. And the fact is it doesn't wear off when you become an adult because you start as that child that can't wait for that morning to get the present you're wanting so desperately. But then you just turn into an adult and you can't wait for that midnight to get the present you've been wanting so desperately. And it's even built into our social media, is it not? You'll scroll and you'll look through things, and it's really all built to advertise something to you. And it's not advertising. You have what you need. You're fine. Be content with that. It is you need something more. And it's always keeping up with the latest trend. No, that cup you had last year doesn't work anymore. You need the Stanley cup. No, the hydro flask you had in high school no longer will be acceptable. In fact, I didn't check TikTok this morning, so maybe the Stanley Cup's out of style. I don't know. But whatever it is, you need it. Or if you're like me now with a toddler, maybe it's the next kid gadget to make your life easier. But we're always being presented something else we need to make us happy. And in fact, our culture not only tells us we need more, but it provides us the means to do so. Why wait to buy it later when you can get it now? To be happy, you need more. And the fact is that even though today in America we have more than we've ever had, the statistics show that we're not happier. We're not more satisfied. You look at the polls and all the stats of the success rates and the successfulness that people think they have and the happiness that they think they have internally, and it does not correlate to all the things that they are getting, because the truth is we have more than we've had before, and we pretty much get it when we want to get it, but it's not making us happier. And the hard truth is that that's not only a truth for American people, it can be a truth for God's people too. That we have a mindset that if I just had something more, I just need this thing, I just need this job, and then I would be content. And what we find ourselves doing is always just chasing contentment, but never catching it. What if someone came up to you and looked you right in the eye and told you, all you need to be content is food on the table and the shirt on your back? How would you respond? How would you respond if that person was the inspired Apostle Paul that is saying to us, all we truly need to be content is just food and covering? I want you to read with me in 1 Timothy beginning chapter 6 and verse 6. Paul says this, but godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we cannot take anything out of this world. But if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evils. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs. We're going to stop there for a moment. Paul is teaching us something here in 1 Timothy 6 that we desperately need to internalize while living in our culture today. It's something that we need to learn about chasing contentment and not continuing to chase contentment. Here in the context, what Paul is talking to Timothy about is some of these people that claim to be Christians, that claim to have godliness, and they thought that by teaching that they could have gain from that. They could become rich from that. And that's how they were going to have a good life. But Paul is desperately trying to tell Timothy, teach these people that that's not where happiness lies. That's not where the gain is. The gain, the riches, comes from godliness, not from your things. So here's our question to begin this morning. How do we get where Paul was? How do we have that mindset to be content only with the essentials? What gave Paul contentment? What did Paul know that our culture in 2024 doesn't know? The first thing that we see in the text is that Paul knew stuff doesn't last. He tells us in verse 7, we brought nothing into the world, and we cannot take anything out of this world. There's a great irony in this thought that you can take nothing with you when you go, because actually, generally, our culture will accept that statement. I mean, it's kind of hard to get around it, right? You can't take anything with you when you die. And there's many modern proverbs and movies and songs that will say exactly those words. We will say that this is a truth. My favorite one was this in a song a few years ago. They put it this way: I've never seen a hearse with a trailer hitch. Can't take it with you when you die. We get that. And it's not just our modern society that gets this. Even the ancients got this. Even the most wealthy of people got this. Alexander the Great essentially conquered the world by age 30. And this statement has been attributed to him before he died, soon before he died. When I am dead, carry me forth on my bier, which is essentially the thing you carry a corpse on. Carry me forth on my bier with my hands not wrapped in cloth, but laid outside so that all may see that they are empty. Even Alexander the Great got it. He had everything, but when he was going to die, he was going to have nothing. And of course, Solomon, the man that had the most wisdom, the most wealth of anyone before him or after him, he also got this. And for chapters in his writing of Ecclesiastes, he will continue to try to tell us that riches and the memory of riches will soon fade. They will not last. But just because we know this truth doesn't mean it's easy to accept. Paul's reminding us of what we already know. One day it's all going to be gone. That putting your trust in things, it's a terrible long-term plan. It will fail in the end. Our stuff is landlocked. You cannot take it with you. And we know that, but it's hard to accept it. We get it. Song lyrics get it. Paul gets it. Solomon gets it. Alexander the Great gets it. We get it, but do we accept it? That one day it's all going to be gone. And despite that reality, it's so easy for us, isn't it, to try to hang on to all the things that we think will bring us satisfaction. I just need this new phone. I just need this car. I need this job to make me happy. But Paul is telling us we are setting ourselves up for failure. Because when it comes to the end, when you die, you're going to look back on your life. Maybe if you're blessed with a long life, and you'll look back on all the things that you think, I just needed this to be happy. And you'll realize, you'll start shaking your head that no, I never really did need that. And no, it never really brought me the happiness I thought it would. I can actually even do this now in my 20s. I only have a few months left to say that in my 20s. But I can look back to the things I thought were just so great in middle school and high school. I just got to have that thing, or I just need this, and it's going to make me so happy. And I look back and it didn't. And it didn't matter. And Paul is telling us that is what is going to happen when you get to the end of your life. Because having stuff isn't the secret to a good life. Godly contentment is. Because there is something that won't fade away when we die. There is something that you can invest in that won't be gone when you die. There's something that will last. And Paul is trying to get us to see that it's godliness with contentment. That is something you can hang on to. That is something that will be a good future plan. And so that's why he can say in verse 8, all we need is food and shelter. That's all we need. We just need the necessities because we have a relationship with God, unlike our relationship with our stuff. Paul knew what would last, and it wasn't his stuff. But Paul also knew in verses 9 and 10 that greed is dangerous. Notice what he says here at 9, but that these desires to be rich cause people to fall into temptation, into a snare. And most other translations will put it this way: they'll cause you to fall into harmful things, into foolish things. I like the way the ESV puts it. It will cause you to fall into senseless things, senseless desires. That's it, isn't it? That's so true. You've seen it, people on Black Friday running over each other to get that flat screen TV and coming out with bruises and broken bones and no TV. And you know the people that have gotten themselves into trouble with credit card debt and just buried themselves trying to get what they can't really afford. We get it. It's senseless, harmful desires. That's what greed leads to. One person put it this way: it's kind of like drinking seawater. The more you drink, the more thirsty you get. But it's not just that. It's not that it just doesn't satisfy. It's that it's dangerous. That's what Paul is trying to get us to see. Greed does not satisfy, and greed is dangerous. And he's just making the same point that Paul made in Ecclesiastes. Notice how Solomon made in Ecclesiastes. Notice how he puts it in chapter 5, verse 10. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This also is vanity. I want you to let this sink in for a second. Do we get what Solomon just told us? What Paul is trying to tell us? If we aren't content with what we have right now, you will not be content when you get what you think you need. If you aren't content with what you have currently right now, you will not be content when you get what you want. It will not satisfy you. And we challenge this, don't we, in our minds that no, I don't know if that's really true. It is true. Solomon is telling us for chapters. Paul is telling us in Timothy's letter that when we get what we think we want, it will not bring the satisfaction you think it will. It will never satisfy. Solomon says, I was there. I had everything. I had the world. And that alone did not satisfy. He was still not content. And so we say, if I could just have this, I'll be satisfied. But the truth is, no, you won't. Because contentment is not about circumstances. Contentment is not about the things you have. Contentment is a heart issue. Contentment is a heart problem. And because it's a heart problem, Paul can say what he says in verse 10. We know it well. That it's this desire of riches that leads to all kinds of evil, right? It's the love of money that leads to all kinds of evil. And we look at that and we think, I'm really glad he said it the way he did. I'm glad he didn't say money itself is the root of all kinds of evil, because we know it's okay to have money, and it is. It's okay to have wealth. Solomon had a lot of wealth, and that wasn't wrong on the surface of it. God gave it to him. But actually, the way Paul puts it kind of makes it sting even a little more, I think. Because he says the love of money is what can lead to all kinds of evils. And here's what the truth of that is that he's speaking to our heart. And that you can love money even if you're poor. You can love money even if you don't have a lot of wealth. If Paul would have said, hey, there's this mark, there's this standard, there's this box you can check, and then you can present it to everybody. I don't have this much, and so there's no way that I'm in trouble. But that's not how he leaves it. No one is immune to this desire for more, whether you're wealthy or whether you have much. Do you remember the temptation of Jesus that Matthew records for us? It's really just a short list. It's just a handful of things that Satan uses against Jesus. And on that list was tempting him with more things, with more stuff. I will give you the kingdoms of the world. In fact, it's not just one of the temptations, it's the final one. This is Satan's last attempt, his final shot to tempt Jesus. And I think we look at those temptations sometimes, I do myself, and we think, well, Satan already knew he was going to lose. This is just they're just playing through the actions, make some bread, jump off a cliff, bow down to me. No, Satan, this was the best he had. And actually, it's pretty good stuff, if we're honest. Jesus makes it look easy, but lots of times I don't make it look easy. That we chase bread when we're really not starving, and we are testing God, and we are bowing down to the things that promise us more. But this is Satan's final attempt to get Jesus to crack. I will give you what you don't have. I will tempt you with more. It's one of Satan's strongest temptations for us today. And it doesn't just cause physical danger. It's not just about your bank account being in danger. It's not just about getting run over on Black Friday. Paul says this has caused some people that have come to the faith to wander from the faith. This craving that they have, as the ESV puts it, has caused them to wander away from the faith. These were people that at one time loved God. They craved a relationship with Christ, but they've allowed this other craving to take them away. The idea of wandering there, it's actually used elsewhere to talk about what false teachers do. False teachers will teach you something that's incorrect, and it will cause you to wander from the truth. Paul is essentially saying that this desire for riches is a really, really bad teacher. It will take you somewhere you don't want to be. And it's something that is very dangerous because it can lead you away from your God. And before we leave this point, this isn't the main point of our sermon this morning, but I do want to throw it out there while we're here. This desire for more, it isn't just about money. Are you content this morning with the people around you? Are you content with your family? Are you content with your spouse? Or are you're hoping that you had something else, something more? Or are you content with your children? Are you just wishing that you had something different or something more? Are you content with your church family? Are you always wishing that you had something different or something more? Paul is telling us that is dangerous. It's not just inconvenient. It's not just a bad habit. This desire for more is something that can separate us from God. So Paul knew that things don't last. Paul knew that it's dangerous, but he also tells us in verse 17 that God provides all. And I think this is helpful for us when thinking about contentment as well. Read with me in verse 17. As for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. Paul says, set your hope on God, because he's the one that provides. Being content means we know our stuff won't last. It means knowing that pursuing it is dangerous, but it also means recognizing where it all comes from. Paul actually already said this in verse 7. We kind of focused on the last half of that verse. But in verse 7, he starts there by saying, for we brought nothing into the world. We don't get all the stuff for ourselves. It doesn't come from me. It doesn't come from what I've done. It doesn't come from my accomplishments. Paul is saying God is the one that provides everything. He's the one that provides all. And I think that helps us in a couple of ways when we're thinking about contentment. The first one is that knowing that God provides all helps us praise and to put our honor, to put our hope in who God is and not ourselves. Because here's the temptation for those of us that have much. Here's the temptation for those of us that have much wealth. That we think, I did this. It's because I'm so smart. It's because I'm so strong. It's because I'm so clever. It's because of all the hard work that I put in that I've got to where I am. But the truth is that God gave you the brain in your head. And that God gave you the body that you do your tasks with. And that God gave you the country you were born into. You didn't choose that. And God gave you the parents that you had and the parents before them. It is God that's providing all of these things, but we lose that. And so the temptation for those of us that have much is to think that I did this. And so what that does is tempts us to just ignore God. Why do I need him? Why do I need to acknowledge him? And why would I find my contentment in him when I can find it in myself? But this also helps for those that have little. Recognizing that God provides all. Because when you don't have everything everyone else has, how easy is it to look and to say, I wish I just had that. I wish I had what they had. I don't have what I need. I don't have what I want. And if I could just have that, then I would have enough. And so what we start to do when we have little is to point the finger at God. Why haven't you given me what you should give me? Why haven't you given me as much as that other person? But when we recognize that it is the all-knowing, the all-powerful, the all-loving God that is giving us our things, that is giving us what we have, that is giving us our families and our situation, our lot in life, we will be able to recognize that he gave us what pleases him and he didn't mess it up. And it's not just about stuff. It's not just about money. It's not just about, I wish I had the car that they had. Sometimes it's harder than that, isn't it? I wish I could have the family they have. And it's so easy to start pointing the finger. Right? Why hasn't God given me this? Why do they get it and I don't? But we realize in verse 17 that God provides all. God provides all. He didn't make a mistake. And he has given you what you need. Because Paul said it in verse 8, anything more than food and clothing, shelter, is just a bonus. It's being richly blessed. And so God provides all, helps us. There's another way this helps us, I think, is that we also recognize in verse 17, this is what Paul says, that God gave us everything to enjoy. God gave us what we have to be satisfied. God gave us what we have in order to enjoy it. And that means that we are able to enjoy it. Do we see that? Because God has given this to it, we are able to be satisfied with it no matter what we have. Discontentment always compares that I don't have what someone else has. But contentment recognizes that I've been given what I have from God, no matter what it looks like. So can I be satisfied with the iPhone 8 when there's a 16 coming out? Yes. Can I be satisfied with my home that isn't able to hold everyone I want it to? Yes. Can I be satisfied with what God has given me to enjoy? The answer is yes. And there's one other truth to this that I want to point out this morning. Because a biblical view of contentment, it should sting. I hope it is. It stung for me. But it shouldn't crush you. It should not crush you. Shouldn't walk away this morning and start thinking, okay, maybe 100 degrees outside and I want the AC on, but that's just desiring more things and that's wanting things and that's bad, don't do it. Or, wife is going to get mad at me if I ask for tea instead of water, whether that happens or not. Okay, that's not the idea, okay? It's not that we never want anything or we never desire anything, right? Paul even shows this in his own life. Look what he wrote to Timothy at the end of his life. This is the last letter that he wrote. Notice what he says to Timothy in verse 13. When you come, bring the cloak that I left with Carpus at Troas, also the books, and above all, the parchments. Paul wanted his books. He wanted his stuff. Now, I understand he's not asking for a Lamborghini, right? He's in prison, but it's not just food and shelter he's asking for. He desires things. Paul desired things. Jesus desired things. We will want things. But the point is, do we want the gift more than the gift giver? You let that desire drive you. You let that desire be the only thing that you're following and the primary thing that you're following. Recognizing that God provides all, gives him the praise, and it seeks for him to be contented. And it allows us to enjoy what we have. I think there's one other thing that Paul shows us in this text, though, about being content. It's that he knew that we tend to set our sights too low. He knew that we tend to look too low and not have our eyes up where they should be. Notice what he says in verse 18 and 19. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share, thus storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of that which is truly life. Paul's talking about true life. He begins it with talking about people being generous. And there is a lesson to be learned there that probably that's maybe a good barometer for us, that if we are willing to give things up, then maybe we really are living in such a way where we need the next thing to make us happy. That maybe there's even a merit to practicing generosity to help with the heart of contentment. That you start to live in such a way that's not looking for the next thing to satisfy, but you're able to give things to others and to view your things in a different way, that it's not just about satisfying yourself, but about helping other people. But I want you to notice what he says about generosity here in verses 18 and 19. The reason why he says we're generous, the reason why Paul says that this is why we can stop scratching and clawing for more, why we can stop trusting in ourselves to satisfy, why we can start seeing our things as not only being for us. He says in 18 and 19 that we are setting up a foundation for the future. Paul says godliness with contentment is the real way you build wealth, where the real riches are. No, you can't take anything with you from this life, but there is something you can take with you. There is something that you can invest in that will last. That when you live a life of contentment and a life of generosity here, it is doing something for your future. Because the truth is that this isn't where the true life is. We tend to think that the things we are building and making and doing and creating here is what it's all about, don't we? We can get in that trap of thinking this is what the real life is, where I'm at right now, because this is where I'm at. But Paul says you need to set your eyes higher than that. That there's somewhere else you're going. That the life here isn't the real thing. And when we start investing in our real future, when we start to have an eternal perspective that Paul had, that allows us to look at just having food, just having shelter, just clothing, and recognizing that it's enough. Because all we're trying to do is get through this life. You get to the true life. That's where the riches are. That's where your real foundation is. It's not about this life. It's about the life to come. Our culture says that you need the latest thing to be satisfied. Paul said we need just the necessities. And that shocking statement in verse 8 teaches us one more truth that I want to close with. Because what he says in verse 8 is, but if we have food and clothing with these, we will be content. And here's the truth that Paul's showing us. The contentment is a choice. It's a choice. You get to choose whether you're going to be content or not. We will be content with these things. You don't have to struggle all through life of just grasping and hoping that one day you'll get lucky enough to have enough in order to satisfy you, in order to be happy. You don't have to live life that way. Continually reaching for things. We have a choice. We have a choice to stop chasing contentment and to reach out and grab it. And that's the question for us this morning. Will you keep chasing? Or will you take hold of it? Because it is a choice. Possessions are not the secret to life. Godliness with contentment is the secret to life. Recognizing that what is God has already given me is being richly blessed. I have gotten what God wanted to give me, and choosing to live a life knowing and enjoying what God has given me is so much better than living a life thinking I need something else. Be happy. Our consumer culture will continue to say, chase contentment by getting more. Satan will continue to tempt you by saying, chase contentment by getting more. But God is telling us this morning that I've already given you more. I've already given you enough. So enjoy it. Be content with it. I hope this thought's helped you this morning. Enjoy our time so much. Over these past year and a half, I know it's quickly coming down to a close. And that is, as I've already said, bittersweet for me and my family. But it has been just such a blessing for us this past year. And it's something that we will not take for granted. It's something that's helped me to have contentment myself, of living a life that relies on brothers and sisters, of living a life that relies on God to provide, to satisfy. And it's the blessed life. It's the way to live. Be satisfied with what God has given us.
Thank you for connecting with us this morning. We're so thankful that you were able to do that. If you have questions, we'd love to have the opportunity to talk to you. You can contact us at www.thebibleway.com or questions@thebibleway.com. questions@thebibleway.com. We'd love to have you in person. Come if you can, but thank you for connecting with us.